Okay, hello and welcome to everybody joining us today. I'm Helen Allen and I'm a pedagogy lead for new product development at Cambridge Assessment English. Shape Education has been running cross-sector events over the last 18 months, bringing people together to accelerate change in education. And we're really delighted to launch Shape Live today. This is the first in our series of bite-sized live-streamed events where we'll be looking at some outline principles to try and continue the debate around teaching and learning and assessment. And our question for today is, how can we create real learning with technology? We know that in some schools, in some homes, technology is facilitating great learning. But we also know that in others, this dream, it isn't fully realized and it's non-existent in some cases. We're also hearing a lot about crisis teaching. So how can we make the jump from providing tools to creating meaningful learning and supporting excellence in teaching and elevated attainment with technology? I'm really delighted to be joined today by Sara Davila, Head of Efficacy and Learning at Immerse, and Ray Snape, Head Teacher at Milton Primary School. If you'd like to turn on your videos and give us a wave, that would be lovely. Welcome to both of you. Sara and Ray will both be giving us their quick lightning talks in response to today's question, and then we'll have some time for some observations and questions from you, our audience. If you can't stay for the whole event, a recording will be available afterwards at shapeeducation.org. And we'll also be continuing the conversation in our Shape Education events channel on LinkedIn over the next week. So, as we're getting started, please do add to the conversation in the chat, ask your comments and pop any questions for the fireside at the end in that chat. You'll see polls there through the session too, and the first one's there already, I think. So please do tell us about the technology you've used over the past year. And you can also find the polls in the video description just underneath. So Sara, we're going to hand over to you first. And I think you're going to help us think about what successful learning with technology can look like.
Well, I'm going to do my best. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm actually calling in from Chicago this morning, so it's a bit early for me, but I am super excited to be here today to talk to you about how we can create real learning with technology. And before I get started, I would like to thank everyone here today, Cambridge Assessment for hosting Shape Live, Helen and Kate for doing the organization, Immerse, my company, for letting me be here today to talk to you, and of course, Ray Snape, our co-speaker, who's here today as well. I'm Sara Davila. I'm best known for working in English language teaching and learning, which I've been doing for 20 years. But very recently, I've moved into virtual reality, which is very exciting and a little unusual to talk about, but I'm quite excited and quite passionate about education. And today I'd like to share a bit with you about how I see technology being used to create meaningful learning. We've put up a bit of a poll for you. So before I move on, I'd like to get a sense of what you think about when you think about technology and have a bit of an idea here. So I'm going to take a look at these results very quickly. It looks like in the last year, many of you have used some tablets, smartphones seem to be out in front. A few people using some smartwatches too, but not so much with the augmented reality and the virtual reality, some of those new and upcoming technologies. I think this is fantastic. I'm absolutely not surprised. And I did not include computers for a reason. I think most of us have been probably married to our laptops or desktops for the last year. So I have a feeling I'd get 100% response there. Now, the reason I'm asking you about what technology you're using is to get an understanding of how we think about technology and what technology actually means. For many of us, we use technology in a very functional way. We think of technology as our calculator. You probably use your smartphone as an alarm clock or your scheduler or as a calendar. You might, when you want to, when you're not even feeling like picking up a smartphone now, just shout out to Alexa or to Google to have them answer questions or tell you about the weather. We think about technology and what it can do for us. And we've often thought about technology and how it can really be integrated into picking up some of those functional parts of our day-to-day. But we rarely think about how technology has become more integrated into our day-to-day lives and looking at technology as a practice. And technology as a practice is one of those critical drivers that will help us get to success with learning through technology. And this is going to require some critical rethinking that needs to be done to see how we get beyond tech as just something that we use to do a thing, and tech is actually fully integrated into what we do. And this is really challenging actually just in education, because outside of the education space, we already see technology as the primary channel of communication. In the last year, without technology, we would have lost many of our friends, our relationships. Many more of us would have been unemployed, but having technology gave us all of these accesses to communication, to the meetings, to the video calls with our grandparents that kept us close and kept us together. Technology has also become a critical processor. We use this day to day, especially those of us who are engaged in our work lives, where we're analyzing massive amounts of data. We're asking technology questions and giving it all of that information to gain insights that we can use to make practical decisions. This is very much technology fully integrated into our lives. And technology is a critical teacher for many of us. And for many of you adults in the last year, you've gone and watched that YouTube video to figure out how to use that platform that you've never heard about before. Or you've reached out on Twitter and talked to an expert, or you've followed somebody on LinkedIn to get more insight in how to do something functionally in your own work or in your own life. Technology has actually become incredibly integrated into what we do and is already very well used as a learning tool. But we need to think about how we can do that inside of the classroom and incorporate technology beyond its functional space inside of the learning space. In order to do that, we have to think really about the technology as a practice and incorporating those digital literacies, which many educators on this call have probably heard of before, and really fully embrace what that can mean for us with technology as a function. And this is going to bring us to our second poll question, which we're going to drop into that channel for you right now. And we'll take a look at the results in just a moment. The reason I'm talking about technology as a practice is it helps to understand with learning where learning is going. So for you at home, where do you think some of these high values technologies like augmented and virtual reality, which no one has really experimented with in the last year, where do you see those inside of the career sector? I'm going to give it a moment and see if we've got some results. I'm very curious to see what people think about this. And then we'll go ahead and move on. Going to wait for those results for a second. There we go. So we see about 50%. And that's a Zoom problem. There we go. 23% see it being used in education, 15% military, about 23% said STEM fields, 15% in healthcare. That's actually really surprising to me. Believe it or not, we're actually seeing massive and rapid adoption of augmented and virtual reality, especially in the medical sciences, because that's an area where training is not only costly, but very dangerous. And using these virtual tools has allowed us to expand what we know and what we can do. And that's extremely important for us as educators, because technology is a driver for change. And what we often don't understand inside of the classroom is where our students are going and how those technologies are used outside of the classroom. And when we have a better understanding of that ourselves as educators, this allows us to really embrace and make the changes that we need to help our learners as they're working towards their future life goals, their future career goals, their future personal successes. And this does require understanding how we can build those technological skills that will allow our students to work across multiple different industries, and also improve how we as teachers can plan to support those students in those critical ways. And if we think about it really, in the last year, our students have learned more technological skills than they have in possibly the last 10 years of education. If you have a 10-year-old child today, they could probably run absolute laps around you in a Zoom call or a GoToWebinar. You put an application in front of a child right now, and they have those skills. What we have been through is a massive digital shift in learning, and that gives us so many different opportunities for what we can actually do inside of the classroom. The basic functions of technology, using it as a calculator, understanding how to use it as our map, our students are well beyond that now. Their abilities and the skills that they have picked up in the last year have really not been recognized. And training teachers to understand how to utilize those skills fully inside of the classroom will really allow us to achieve the future of learning of technology that we're looking for. fully embracing technology as a practice, it means not only changing how we think about what students need to learn, but also how we assess our students. And this is going to be another critical part of really changing what we think about when it comes to learning. Testing for mastery is no longer as relevant as when every student can find the answer on Google. But testing our students to find the answers would prove that they might know something. We need to look beyond just having the answer at point of mind and what technology actually shows us that students have talent in doing. Testing students, and another challenge that we have with testing and assessment is that we tend to test our students individually on what they know alone, on what they can do in isolation, on what they can do by themselves. But the reality of our world today and the future is all about interaction, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. Those 4 C's that we often hear about. And that means looking not at what students do well alone, but really looking at how our students work well together, the skills that they can utilize with technology to collaborate and create, to innovate, and really face future challenges. And it's really no longer acceptable for us to wait. Understanding and using technology in a fully integrated way will allow our learners to achieve their future goals and drive those goals that we have as a larger society to tackle the problems and the many challenges that we face now and the next 10 years, from climate to the environment and really far beyond. So to summarize, with learning and how we can create real learning through technology, this is going to happen when we fully integrate technology into our learning, when we provide multiple opportunities for deeper learning experiences that really integrate technology as practice inside of our classroom experiences and revise our assessment to better represent the needs of our future society, one in which we know is accessible to anyone at the push of a button or the question to Siri. But the real insight is going to be gained when humans are asking those questions, humans are processing that information together, and humans are using that to solve real world problems. Before I leave, we're going to have a final poll question up. After listening to this little bit of a talk, I'd like to see just how you're thinking about the types of technology that we're using in the upcoming year, and what you'd be curious to look at. And I look forward to talking about that a bit more when we get into our fireside conversation. So hopefully that was, you have found that interesting. And I'm checking in to see if there are any cues before I hand it back over to our organizers.
Okay, so I think we're going to hang on to any questions for the fireside chat. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was really great to hear you speaking from the kind of the ed tech angle. And please do keep adding, or everyone keep adding your questions into the chat, and we will come to those at the very end. We're going to add in a question there for you too, just in advance of Ray's talk. And it's an interesting question. Are robots the teachers of the future, bearing in mind that your washing machine doesn't look like a human? Ray will be looking at your responses in a moment. So let's move straight on and see from Ray's perspective, what has been learned through this pandemic about schools, about curriculum and pedagogy, and what educators and parents think of all this. Ray, I think you're still muted, sorry.
Yeah, we're there now.
We've got it, great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I really enjoyed that talk. And thank you, Helen and Kate, for inviting me along to this next SHAPE Live event. I love seeing the progress that SHAPE is making with some great provocations and also bringing extraordinary, exciting people from across the world together to discuss this important topic. So Sarah has given one very important perspective, which I really enjoyed. I'm going to come at it from a slightly different direction from the case of working in a school. So I'm a head teacher, national leader of education, working in a 2-form entry primary school in Cambridge. But I'm going to start by going back to this weekend. So like many people who are on the call that are in this country, our children have come back to school after the 3rd lockdown. So since the 18th of December, children have been working online at home, and parents have been their educators alongside the teachers. And while I was getting my daughter Esme's bag together and trying to just check she could still fit into her shoes that she's going to need next week, I came across this little chicken. And I thought to myself, Easter, we've only just had Easter. So I'm going to need to put this away for about a year because Easter has just happened. And something really bizarre has happened from my point of view with regard to time, because during this year, time has really slowed down at moments. People have smelt the flowers. People have heard the birds in the trees because the cars have stopped. They've noticed the freshness of the air and they've seen the passing seasons. But equally, time has concertinaed up like never before. And it's hard to believe that actually Easter is in 3 weeks' time. So something strange has happened to our understanding of time. And in talking about time, this time next week, on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday, it will be a year to the day when Prime Minister Johnson said, we are closing all schools on Monday. And I remember that moment so specifically. We had training in place for some dialogic literary gatherings, and that all had to be put to one side because we needed to get together as a faculty to think about how we were going to support our children who were no longer going to be in school but still had an entitlement to learning. So we gathered together packs of textbooks and pencils and sharpeners and rubbers, and we made up packs that we either delivered by hand to children at the doors, or we invited them to come and collect them from the front entrance at the school. And then very quickly after that, we realized that this paper-based approach was not sustainable. We were going to have to work out how we were going to speed up and get online. And thinking about the tools that Sara mentioned earlier, I used Twitter and social media to find out which was going to be the best platform we could use in order to facilitate that learning for children working remotely. And we came across a product called Seesaw, which is from Chicago. It's used by many schools in this country, but it is a platform where teachers are able to communicate with the children and also give the children specific tasks that they could then get on with at home. It's a really user-friendly, parents could use it, children could use it. So we thought. And on the 24th of March, I did a tweet. This was the Tuesday. I did a tweet which said, the future of schools has begun. It started yesterday. Because I could see, as many other educators were learning at the time, that the new shape of education was going to be about a blending of digital resources alongside human resources. And as the children are starting to come back or have come back this week, everything that we have learned about using this digital platform, we are holding onto and we are optimizing pedagogically in order to strengthen our relationships with parents and also to flip the learning that is happening in the classroom. So teachers are using the Seesaw platform, the learning platform, to upload the evening before the types of activity the children are going to be doing the next day so that their brains are primed and time can be used more efficiently. However, I want to also just talk about something else that we learned during this time. So we learned that not all children, and this is the same for the nation, not all children have a laptop. We also learned that some children had to access Seesaw via a singular phone that their mum might have. And there might be 5 children in the household, one in nursery, one in primary, 2 in secondary, another one somewhere in between. And managing all of this for a parent would be incredibly hard. Some parents stuck to the paper-based resources, and we could not support them. We could not convince them to move on to using a computer. For one family, we took a laptop round in a rucksack, and with all of the tools that we thought would help them to get online. A week later, we went back and we said, we're not seeing you on Seesaw. What's happening? And the dad said, we haven't got a computer. And the little girl said, Dad, we have got a computer. The school brought one round last week and you stuck it in the wardrobe. And this term digital divide and digital poverty is real, and it is everywhere. And it is in affluent schools like mine in the centre of Cambridge. So whilst we absolutely fully embrace what digital technology can do, we do have to recognise that not everybody's experiences are the same, and that if we are not careful, we are going to embed even more inequality in the system if we don't start thinking about how we can ensure that all children have access to the types of tools that Sarah was describing earlier, that all of us have found so useful. This pandemic has taught us not only about digital poverty, but very real poverty around food poverty. So in addition to taking laptops to families, we've also been taking, as many schools have been doing, food parcels to families, clothing parcels to families. We have learned through this pandemic just how vulnerable and how few the resources have been distributed across this nation. And it is quite frightening that schools are working in this place to try to address all of these challenges, and the government itself questioned in Parliament as to whether they were going to continue with free school meals during the holiday time. And it was a football player, Marcus Rashford, who had to stand up to ensure that children weren't left behind. So in going forward, we need to think about how the offer that the digital world, the flexibility, the connectivity, the opportunity for people to diversify their employment through embracing technology, it could really accelerate the life chances for many people, but could leave more and more people behind. There are other lessons about lockdown which I would like to share. The experience from the children has been remarkable. They have loved learning online, but they really have missed their teachers and they have really missed their friends. But in amongst that, they have loved working in smaller groups. They've loved working in teams of about 15 children. They've felt more heard. They feel smarter. This is what they've reported. And so this again speaks to those 4 C's that Sarah mentioned earlier. And looking at our pedagogy for the 21st century, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, these are all of the types of skills that our children need to fully have experience in. And I am pleased to say that I see a great hope for changes in education. Parents have now had an insight as to what learning really looks like. Michael Rosen wrote a really scathing piece about his experience of his child learning about fronted adverbials. We need to remember that secretaries of state are primarily the ones at the moment setting the course of the curriculum, and teachers themselves are having to deliver in line with this top-down narrative. But there is this opportunity as parents are becoming more aware of what has really been, what the real experience of children has been in school, they're starting to question. And so I see organizations like SHAPE, organizations like the Foundation for Educational Development, really starting to connect agents for change within the ecosystem and starting to question whether we need to do things differently and think differently in order to meet the very real and exciting possibilities that technology, as well as human brilliance, can realize in the future. So I'm feeling very optimistic. We've learned a lot of lessons. We need to keep embedding them in order to move forward.
Thank you, Ray. And I'm just looking here. I mean, it's really important to listen, actually. I think that's I'm just listening to you, and it is really important to listen to what's happening with those children, with their parents, with the educators, with head teachers, with all the different people who are sort of at the, well, we can say at the chalk face, but they are the people who are working with the curriculum and the learning aims, and they're doing the work. It's so important to listen to the experiences of these people when we're having these kind of conversations. And there's a question here actually for Ray, and it says here, what do you think, Ray, made the children feel smarter? That's my favorite question so far, and it's certainly something that pricked up my ears when I heard you say it. So what was it, Ray? Can you give us a little bit of more detail there?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. We were really surprised at that. We asked the children for their experience, and it was because they simply had more time with their teacher, and they had the opportunity to get heard, and they weren't having to use hand up techniques, because that coexistence in the smaller group was becoming much stronger. Their sense of belonging in the smaller crew was becoming pedagogically so much more helpful to the learning and assessment cycle. So that was about being in the smaller crew, feeling their voices were heard. And it's an appreciative phenomenon that more that you are noticed, the more that you want to engage, the more that you are confident to speak out. It was just a really effective learning loop.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I mean, we've just had International Women's Day as well, and what was it? I can't remember. It's the choosing, sort of choosing to be heard or putting your hand up. I can't remember the term exactly. And we've just been discussing that as well at my workplace, and it is really interesting how technology, as opposed to our normal workplace behaviors, the technology has really facilitated some people over this lockdown in being heard in a very different way. And I think it's not just children in schools who are experiencing this. The ability to have a hands up symbol, as opposed to actually putting your real hand up, it's a very different act, isn't it? Sort of the ability to write your question or put your comment in the chat, or even just to add your thumbs up to somebody else's comment, and all these kind of incremental stages of being heard, or being able to express yourself or feel part of the group, are very interesting, actually. And I don't know, Sarah, did you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, we've seen, and this is true in the English language teaching community as well, that there are a lot more opportunities and channels for access, not only to teachers, but also to students. So we've seen students learn to embrace the chat to actually communicate and collaborate with each other, which allows their voices to be heard in a way that might be very difficult if you're sitting in a class with 20 to 25 students. So technology is absolutely unboxed for some students, a lot more opportunities for self-guided learning, for individual achievement, for focusing on personal interests. And I've definitely seen some children who are like, I've learned more now because I have the ability to dig in, and my teachers have more time to support us. On the other side of that, being a teacher, I also know a lot of teachers feel like they have less time to support their students. They're doing a lot more work to make sure that their students are being supported. And a lot of that was because that original shift to digital learning was really an emergency situation. And so we're only now just starting to see kind of a better rollout of best practices in online teaching and learning. But Ray has made some excellent points. Access and equity, those are going to be huge issues that are coming up in the next couple of years. And we've already seen several different governments talk about rolling out broadband as a utility, because it's really quite clear that technology has really become so integral and integrated as part of our general expectation of living, that these types of services are really public needs, and we're going to have to think about how we support that well in the future. And frankly, we all win from that, because as we get broadband access, as we allow more access and more equitable access to different types of technology, then we can actually move into some of these really interesting technologies that are quickly being adopted in certain sectors, like virtual and augmented reality, that are currently rolling out in the health fields, some of the science fields, and some of the finance fields as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And just sort of building on this kind of, we've got that kind of real thing about making the children feel smarter, okay, but in what other areas has the tech, or what areas does tech serve as better in education now than perhaps you expected maybe 5 years ago? What is it about that tech now that's actually got some value in this education space?
For teachers for a long time, I think one of the real challenges with technology was the stability. It was not that there wasn't an interest in using tech in the classroom. I first integrated, I think, a Moodle. I started playing with Moodle in around 2006 or 7 when that came out, but I had little websites for my students as far back as 2004 to distribute worksheets, things like that. And when I've worked with teachers as a trainer over the years, the real challenge with bringing technology in was the fear that something might break down, that you can't expect it to work well, that it's unreliable, that the internet will go out all of a sudden. So there were a lot of reasons to sort of push that off. But I think in just a couple of years, even before the pandemic, we were starting to see a lot more integration of learning technologies in the classroom, because students had all gotten access to these smartphones and cell phones. And suddenly you saw teachers bringing in things like Kahoot inside of the classroom, or Quizlet, or other types of learning games to get better interaction, to allow for more collaboration. So I think that as technologies have gotten smaller, and I think the smartphone has been an absolute game changer for equity, because they are so small but so powerful. And learning how to integrate even that level of technology and all that it can do inside of the classroom can really promote a lot of change. The example that I like to give is the technology that literally lives inside of an old iPhone 3 is faster than some of the technology we used to originally go to the moon. So we have access to this, and it's kind of exciting that now it is stable and a bit more robust, and we can engage with it. And frankly, the results of the last year and the fact that learning didn't stop completely, students weren't out of school, we didn't have a year off, we actually had a year of transition. That speaks to how well teachers have really been able to adopt and utilize these technologies, regardless of the challenges. It's certainly the support and the improvement, the stability, and even the expertise of teachers and students has really improved, which has made this a better playing field in the last couple of years.
Certainly from a primary point of view, we can see that there's a number of resources that have been used across the primary sector. So national resources such as Oak Academy, also YouTube has been integrated, and other teachers have been sharing assemblies or sharing lessons themselves. But what's really interesting, I think, from seeing today, the 9th of March, but in the last 2 days, what I am seeing is teachers sitting with their children, talking about their experience and sharing stories. One class got together, and their very first activity was to create a virtual hug. They put their hands together, they made some marvelous concertina, there's my word again, concertina origami, and they made a virtual hug that they could stand in. So I think what we have also learned is that the real humanity, people are going to start to ask more from schools, that isn't just to accelerate academic exam results, but about not just being better people in the future, but having a good experience and a good quality of life now. And we've slowed down as a nation and through that time, we just caught a glimpse of what life should be like. I think Forbes has said that in the future, businesses have got to think about not the employee experience, but about the experience for the human being. So the personal, the social, the emotional. There's been much talk, so much so that I think I said much 4 times, on emotional well-being. The 2030 OECD framework has well-being as its possible outcome, but I don't think we've really, as a nation, thought actually well-being is what we should be striving for. So I'm hoping that it will fundamentally change the purpose of education. So we think about a good quality of life, feeling fulfilled in ourselves as human beings, fulfilled as a nation, and making sure that we have a sustainable way, because we know climate change is real. We know there are lots of inequalities, and we need to think about ways to address that. So I'm also seeing people minded to think more deeply about the purpose of education, and I think that's a very positive thing as well.
Yes, definitely. And I've got 2 follow-up questions to that, really. So one of them is, Ray, I mean, what you're describing, sounds fabulous, but what do you think might hold us back from incorporating that into the system that we currently have?
Last I heard Mary Bousted talking at the Foundation of Education Development Summit. It was the biggest education summit he's ever seen. It was a fantastic event. She's the national leader for the biggest union of teachers. And she said the problem with our country is we put all our education into the exams basket. And that, I think, is it. I think she nailed it, is that our minds are so about end of key stage data, whether it's key stage 2, GCSEs, 11 pluses in some local authorities. It starts at 4. We are the most tested nation in Europe. And our SHAPE, obviously, Cambridge assessment, we know that assessment, it's a cliche, isn't it? From the Latin, to sit beside. It's really about formatively, how can we support children to learn better? It isn't about qualifications that open door or don't open doors. It should be about us as learners, as a principle, from cradle to grave. We just keep on learning. But there is this very repressive paradigm of exams being the absolute gold standard that will allow us to get into university. And yet we know the pathways for careers are now increasingly going to be in the vocational space. So we've got a huge mindset shift for parents to look at alternatives to university, for schools to be working within the ecosystem of employers and businesses and early years provision, to create a more joined up look of what education can be, so that we even bring in third age education. We build in libraries as locations for learning. Andy Burnham, as an example, is doing some amazing work in Greater Manchester, thinking about that cradle to grave approach. So we do need to have a real refocus on what education is and what it isn't.
Did you want to respond at all to that, Sarah?
No, I would actually pick up on what Ray is saying. And I think I was thinking about this recently. I was reading a story of a student who got caught up in that whole GSE scandal with all of the grades being adjusted by algorithms. And I even remember when I was in my primary school age and being told at the age of 10, well, this is what your future is going to look like. With the way that technology has shifted in our society, it's no longer appropriate for us to take students in their teens, to take students even younger than that, and say that based on these algorithms and these data points, this is where we think you're going to be in the future. Because the future is wild. I literally work in a company where my job is virtual reality. There is no way that anyone could have told me at 10 years old that that was what my career was going to look like when I hit my 40s. And I think that we have to be very aware that with what students can do right now with technology, we have 3-year-olds who can successfully sit and navigate and manage a Zoom classroom. Think about what that learner looks like when they're 23, where they've grown up seeing technology not only as a practical functional tool, but also as a fully integrated part of their life, where they use as a resource, where they explore different realities, where they can go backwards and forward in history, having all of that knowledge and ability to reach out and collaborate. So I think this is going to require a lot of adjustment in what we think good looks like, and definitely some rethinking, very much as Ray has positioned here, on our assessment practices and what that looks like for successful learning in the future. So I'd just pick up, I think we're both in agreement here, and I would close that out by saying, by adding that.
Yeah, no,
I am going to just slightly be a bit controversial, because it isn't the case for every 3-year-old. And that is where there was a question in the chat about how do we think about educating the adults? And in 2008, there was a massive national push for reading, and it went through into EastEnders. It was a massive idea around raising the profile of reading. And so if we are serious about what we can do, we've got to work now. And it isn't about necessarily educating them when they are in school. We've got to get to the parents to educate or to support. It sounds terribly patriarchal, doesn't it? But I mean, we need to look realistically at how do we ensure that parents aren't left behind so that their children won't be left behind. So it does need a really big national approach, the rollout of Wi-Fi, the rollout of access to tech, and so on.
Lovely. And that sort of rolls into, I think we had a question earlier from Maria Belen. She says, how do we do the right practice in the right moment? And I guess that kind of, that seems connected to how do we choose the right tech for what we were talking about before, which is kind of like a human education, an education that fits the learner and the parent and the school that the learner is in. I don't know, Ray, maybe would you like to respond? I don't know. Oh,
that's it. I think we're there now. Yes, great. I think just coming back, how do we get the right tech? I think it isn't about the right tech. It's about the right skills to access the right tech. And fear is what stops people driving the right tech. So picking up on what Sara is saying, the 3-year-old is fearless, but there are still people who, because this, I'm going to just throw it out there, is that the BBC microbit in the 80s, there is still, for some of us, there is still this idea that we will break computers. There is still this fear for some people that these are to be looked after. They're very, very precious. And we think the same way about a pen or a pencil. So we need to give people the confidence to try everything out in the same way as they might approach picking up any other resource. We don't say to people, you can only access this book if you know how to access a book. But we've got to teach people about this whole array of opportunities so that they are fearless.
Yes, I'd agree, definitely, and sort of getting technology to the place where it's viewed in the same way as a pen or a pencil. I think that's where we hope to be headed. Sara, would you like to finish us off? We've got about sort of 30 seconds here. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think I'll pick up on there. I saw earlier in the comments someone who put, it's like you have to know who the learner is and what it is that they're looking for. And I think when it comes to technology choices, whether or not you're educating someone who's 3, someone who's 30, or someone who's 80, technology is always what you need, what is most appropriate for that moment and for that learner and for their interests and needs. And sometimes that, interestingly enough, VR headsets, very popular in seniors' homes, because a senior can put on a VR headset and take a tour to the Caribbean, all still being safe and all still being nurtured, in the same way that a 3-year-old child is just learning how to use a pencil to draw a picture and is just as fascinated by that imaginary world they're creating. So it's always about having the right tools and the right access at the right time the right education and the right support. But I think it's really quite exciting where we're at right now. And even with the frustration that we've been through, it's positioned us for an amazing shift in society that we have a lot of opportunities in front of us to capture. And it will be really interesting to be a part of that change as it goes forward.
Thank you so much, Ray and Sarah. We've come to the end of our time now. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. We will be continuing the conversation over in our Shape Education Events channel in LinkedIn. So we'll be responding to some of the questions that we weren't able to cover just now today, and that'll be over the week coming. And we'll also be running these Shape Live events regularly from May. So keep an eye on shapeeducation.org for upcoming events and topics. And we hope to see you there. Thank you so much, everybody, to our speakers and our audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Okay, now.